All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. We're going to read chapter 17 here of Frankenstein. Um, and this is an interesting chapter because the monster has told his story. He has asked a proposition of Dr. Frankenstein, and he says, I need you to do this for me, um, or I'm going to be a problem for you and everyone you loved. Now, of course, at the end of chapter 16, he tells him, I'm alone. I'm miserable because I'm alone. I need you to create me a companion. I need you to create another monster, just like me, a, a female of the species that can be kind of like my wife. Right? He wants love. He wants companionship. He says, if you do this, I will quit the world of man forever. And I will leave. I will leave everyone alone, and I won't be a problem anymore. But this is what you should do. Now we're left to wonder if Frankenstein will actually do this because we know he regrets it the first time. So where we see chapter 17 pick up is the monster asks this of Frankenstein. He says, this you must create for me. Now the perspective is going to shift back to a me, which is like Frankenstein. It's him speaking again. So now we're back to his perspective. So for a few chapters, we dipped into the monsters and now we're back out. Let's go ahead and start here. It says, being finished speaking and fixed his looks upon me in the expectation of a reply. But I was bewildered, perplexed, and unable to arrange my ideas sufficiently to understand the full extent of his proposition. He continued, you must create a female for me with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede. So notice he says that, like, you owe this to me, right? I demand this as a right. Right? I demand companionship. The latter part of his tale had kindled anew in me the anger that had died away while he narrated his peaceful life among the cottagers, and as he said this, I could no longer suppress the rage that burned within me. This is also interesting too because we have more information that the monster is who killed William, right? And that is how all of that stuff went down. So he says that, Frankenstein says that when the monster was just telling me about, him living with the cottagers, I was sympathetic towards him. I wished better for him. I was sad that he was treated so horribly. But when he got to the part, with William, it rekindled my rage. That's what Frankenstein says. I do refuse it, and no torture shall ever extort a consent from me. You may render me the most miserable of all men, but you shall never make me base in my own eyes. Shall I create another like yourself, whose joint wickedness might desolate the world? Begone. I have answered you. You may torture me, but I will never consent. Right. Make me miserable. Do it. Right. I'm not going to make you another companion creature. You're in the wrong, says the fiend. And instead of threatening, I am content to reason with you. I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind? You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Remember that. And tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me. You would not call it murder if you could precipitate me into one of these ice rifts and destroy my frame, the work of your own hand. Shall I respect the man when he condemns me? Let him live with me in the interchange of kindness instead of injury? I would bestow every benefit upon him with tears of gratitude at his acceptance. But that cannot be. The human senses are insurmountable barriers to our union, yet mine shall not be the submission of abject slavery. I will revenge my injuries if I cannot inspire love. So notice, he has his mission statement here. He says, I want to inspire love. I want people to love, be loving, especially my creator, right? If I can't do that, I will revenge my injuries, right? He will take vengeance on those that condemned him. I will cause fear, and chiefly towards you, my archenemy, because my creator, do I swear, inextinguishable hatred. Have a care, I will work at your destruction, nor finish till I desolate your heart, so that you shall curse the hour of your birth. Right? So it's getting intense here. He says, look, if you don't do this for me, I will do nothing. I will dedicate my entire life to making you miserable, such that you will curse the hour of your own birth. Right? And of course, Frankenstein's probably responding to this. He's like, ha, I'm already miserable. Right? What else do you want from me? And so that's how he plays this here. Let's continue. continues here. A fiendish rage animated him as he said this, and his face wrinkled into contortions too horrible for eyes to behold. But presently, he calmed himself and proceeded. Like, that's a small little scene. Did you catch that? He becomes extremely angry, but what does he do? He calms himself. It's clear that the monster is subject to extreme emotions, just like Victor is, right? We said like father, like son. But he's also much better at processing those emotions, right? He feels the anger well up inside of him, but he doesn't act out. He doesn't punch, he doesn't scream, he doesn't cry, he doesn't fall ill. He calms himself and proceeds. Notice the very next line. The monster says, I intended to reason, right? He's like, I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm trying to have a conversation as a grown human being would do. It says, this passion, this anger that I have is detrimental to me. For you do not reflect that you are the cause of the success. It's like it's your fault. You're the one who's enraging me like this. This passion is killing me. If any being felt emotions of benevolence towards me, I should return them 100 and 100-fold. For that one creature's sake, I would make peace with the whole kind. But I now indulge in dreams of bliss that cannot be realized. When I ask you, what I ask of you is reasonable and moderate. I demand a creature of another sex that is hideous as myself. The gratification is small, but it is all that I can receive, and it shall content me. It is true, we shall be monsters, cut off from the world, but on that account we shall be more attached to one another. Our lives will be happy, will not be happy, but they will be harmless and free from the misery I now feel. Here's what I want you to be thinking when you read this. Like, if I'm reading this, I'm going, he says, what I ask of you is reasonable and moderate, right? He's making a claim. This is an argument, right? So now the question is this a reasonable proposition? Is this a moderate proposition, right? We have to see it from Frankenstein's perspective, we have to see it from the monster's perspective, but from our perspective as an outsider, is it moderate? Is it reasonable? He says, I demand a creature of the female sex, right? Hideous just like myself. We will be miserable monsters, but we will be happy because we will have one another, right? We will be content to have companionship. We won't be alone in the world. So yes, what he's asking is, I would like a mate, I would like a partner. But what he's really asking is, help me be not alone, right? I don't want to be so isolated and alone in the world. He knows what he needs, and he's going to try to get it. Here's the other question. Some people have looked at this and said, they won't be happy, right? The monster says our lives will not be happy. He says they will be harmless and free from misery, but they won't be happy. Some people look at this and go, well, what happens if, 6 months into this new life that he will have created for himself, and he's still not happy, and he's expecting to be something else, and he's still miserable, right? Then, as Frankenstein talks about up here, I know it's a little bit farther out, he says, if I create another one of you, then there's 2 of you to destroy everything, right? That would be terrifying. He's like, I'm not doing that. So Frankenstein has some concerns here. Beyond that, there's also the question of this creature, which a lot of more feminist-minded critics of this book have pointed out. In this scene, it's not accounting for whether or not that creature would like to even be the mate of this monster, right? That creature is just being created for the sole purpose of something else, right? Her existence and purpose is due to the monster. He doesn't want to feel lonely, right? And so it's kind of like he feels bad for being created, and now he has to be lonely and upset and miserable, right? And yet he wants another one to be created so she can be lonely and upset and miserable with him as well, right? You probably heard the phrase misery loves company. That's what this is, right? So a lot of people look at this and go like, sure, I get the idea of not wanting to be lonely or not wanting to feel like the only one in the world that's you. But is it reasonable to just create another human life? To say, well, welcome to life. Your purpose is to be miserable with this monster. Good luck, right? People feel bad for the female monster. He says, oh, my creator, make me happy. Let me feel gratitude towards you for one benefit. Let me see that I excite sympathy of some existing thing. Do not deny me my request. So notice Frankenstein here. He says, I was moved. I shuddered when I thought of the possible consequence of my consent. But I felt that there was some justice in his argument. His tale and the feelings he now expressed proved him to be a creature of fine sensations. And I did not, as maker, owe him all the portions of happiness that was, and did I not, as his maker, owe him all the portions of happiness that was in my power to bestow? He saw my change of feeling and continued. He says, if you consent, if you agree to do this thing, neither you nor any other human being shall ever see us again. I will go to the vast wilds of South America. My food is not that of man. I do not destroy the lamb, the kid, to glut my appetite. Acorns and berries afford me sufficient nourishment. My companion will be of the same nature as myself and will be content with the same fare. We shall make our bed of dried leaves, the sun will shine on us, and man will ripen, our food. The picture I present to you is peaceful and human, and you must feel that you could deny it only in wantonness of power and cruelty. Pitiless as you've been towards me, I now see compassion in your eyes. Let me seize the favorable moment and persuade you to promise what I so ardently desire. Frankenstein says, so you propose to fly from the habitations of man, to dwell in those wilds where the beasts of the fields will be your only companion? How can you, who long for the love and sympathy of mankind, persevere in this exile? You will return again and seek their kindness, and you will be met with their detestation. Your evil passions will be renewed, and you will have a companion to aid you in the task of destruction. This may not be. Cease to argue the point, for I cannot consent. So this turns into something more of a dialogue, an argument. So he says, so let me get this straight. You propose to go to South America and live with the wild animals. He says, but you seek the love and sympathy of man, right? Maybe if the monster is human, maybe it's natural for humans to seek love and sympathy from other people, right? Other humans. And Frankenstein says, look, you're always going to want that. It's never going to go away. Even if you're living alone and you have a companion, it's not going to go away. But what happens, just as you've seen before, when you go seeking the love and sympathy of mankind, only to be met with destruction and hatred, right? Frankenstein says, I cannot do this for you. The monster responds. He says, how inconstant are your feelings? But a moment ago you were moved by my representations, and why do you harden yourself to my complaints? I swear to you by the earth which I inhabit, and by you who made me, that the companion you bestow, I will quit. That with the companion you bestow, I will quit the neighborhood of man, and dwell as it may chance in the most savage of places. My evil passions will have fled, for I shall meet with sympathy. My life will flow quietly away, and in my dying moments I shall not curse my Maker. His words had a strange effect on me. I compassionated him and sometimes felt a wish to console him, but when I looked upon him, when I saw that filthy mass that moved and talked, my heart sickened and my feelings were altered to those of horror and hatred. I tried to stifle these sensations. I thought that as I could not sympathize with him, I had no right to withhold the small portion of happiness, which was yet in my power to bestow. So a big theme in this book is the idea that visually we can see things, we can see people, and we can judge them based off of physical appearances, and that does something to us, right? This is not a great thing that happens. We have a tendency to look at somebody and judge them purely off of the way that they look, right? And this is what happened to the monster. Frankenstein says, his words moved me, right? His argument, his feelings, his emotion, his humanity moved me, but when I look at him, he loses all of his humanity. I don't see him as human anymore. I'm sickened by him. And that's kind of the human struggle, right? We have such a problem with, seeing people as human when they don't fit what we want them to be, right? And that's what he's got going on. You swear to be harmless, I said, but have you not already shown a degree of malice that should make me reasonably distrust you? May not even this be a feint that will increase your triumph by affording a wider scope to your revenge? How is this? I must not be trifled with, and I demand an answer. If I have no ties and no affections, hatred and vice must be my portion. The love of another will destroy the cause of my crimes, and I shall become a thing whose existence, everyone will be ignorant. So if you do this, I will disappear. My vices are the children of a forced solitude that I abhor, and my virtues will necessarily arise when I live in common with an equal. I shall feel affections of a sensitive being and become linked to a chain of existence and events from which I am now excluded. I paused for some time to reflect on all he had related and the various arguments he had employed. I thought of the promise of virtues which he had displayed on the opening of its existence, and the subsequent blight of all kindly feeling and loathing and scorn which his protectors had manifested towards him. The power and threats were not omitted in my calculations. A creature who could exist in the ice caves of the glacier and hide himself in the pursuit among the ridges of inaccessible precipices was a being possessing faculties it would be in vain to cope with. After a long reflection, I concluded that justice, that the justice due both to him and to my fellow creatures demanded me that I should comply with his request. So he says, I think I owe this to him. I owe this to him and my fellow humans, right? If he's going to start killing everyone, I should do this. He turns to the monster and says, I consent to your demand on your solemn oath to quit Europe forever and every other place in the neighborhood of man, as soon as I deliver into your hands a female who will accompany you in your exile. I swear, he cried, by the sun and by the blue sky of heaven and by the fire of love that burns in my heart, that if you grant my prayer, while they exist, you shall never behold me again. Depart to your home and commence your labors. I shall watch their progress with unutterable anxiety, and fear not that when you are ready, I shall appear. So he agrees. Frankenstein says, okay, I'll do it. But I demand you take a solemn oath to leave the neighborhood of man forever. And the monster says, I will do it, right? He says, by the fire of love that burns in my heart, you will never see me again after you give me this creature. Saying this, he suddenly quitted from me. Fearful, perhaps, of he changed my sentiments. I saw him descend the mountain with greater speed than the flight of an eagle and lost quickly among the undulations of the ice. So remember a few chapters ago, Frankenstein spent like a long time climbing this mountain, right? He had to rest, he had to stop halfway, he had to stop and recoup. The monster just darts down. This is a beastly creature who is strong and endurable. His tail had occupied the whole day, and the sun was on the verge of the horizon when he departed. So it's about to be nighttime. I knew that I ought to hasten my descent towards the valley, as I should soon be encompassed in the darkness, but my heart was heavy and my steps slow. The labor of the winding wind in the little pass of the mountain, and fixing my feet firmly as I advanced, perplexed me, occupied as I was by the emotions which the occurrences of the day had produced. So again, he's emotionally heavy right now. Night was far advanced when I came to the halfway resting place and seated myself beside the fountain. The stars shone at intervals as the clouds passed over them, dark pines rose before me, and every here and there a broken tree lay on the ground. It was a scene of wonderful solemnity and stirred strange thoughts within me. I wept bitterly, and clasping my hands in agony, I exclaimed, "O stars and clouds and winds, ye are all about to mock me. If ye really pity me, crush sensation and memory, let me become as nothing. But if not, depart and leave me in darkness." These were wild and miserable thoughts, but I cannot describe to you how the eternal twinkling of the stars weighed upon me, and how I listened to every blast of wind as it were a dull, ugly siroc on its way to consume me. So it's taken a full day, and now Frankenstein is taking basically all the night and all the next day, or like the morning of the next day, to get back down the mountain, and he's going to go start the project. Morning dawned before I arrived in the village of Claremont. I took no rest, but returned immediately to Geneva. So he's going right back into his studies and to make this monster. Even in my own heart, I could give no expression to my sensations. They weighed on me with a mountain's weight, and their excess destroyed my agony beneath them. Thus I returned home, and entering my house, presented myself to my family. My haggard and wild appearance awoke intense alarm, but I answered no question. Scarcely did I speak. I felt as if I were placed under a ban, as if I had no right to claim their sympathies, as if never more might I enjoy companionship with them. Yet, even thus, I loved them to adoration, and to save them, I resolved to dedicate myself on my abhorred task. The prospect of such an occupation made every other circumstance of existence pass before me like a dream, and that only thought had to turn, had to me the reality of life. So he goes back home to his family, and he feels so far away from them. He feels like he is emotionally distraught, and he can tell them nothing. But once again, he's isolated, right? And when we get isolated, when Frankenstein in the story gets isolated, good things do not happen. So he feels lost, right? And he needs other people there to kind of be loving and supportive to him, but he can't do that. He says, but to save them, I must endure this, and I must create this female monster for my other creation.